All the way back in 2016, there was this game that was set to be released that was going to blow the minds of everybody in the video game industry. This game was called No Man's Sky. I say was called. It still has the same name, but honestly, the game we have today under that name is not the same game that released all the way back then. And there seems to be a really good reason for that. Back when this game was in the promotional stage of development, there were so many things that were being promised to the people that honestly just didn't come to fruition. I'll give you a rundown on what this game is about. Basically, it's an open world exploration game. I say open world, but that's probably not really doing the game any justice. It's an open universal game, or just a free roam space game. I don't really know how to explain it, but basically the map is massive. So you have a spaceship, and you can travel to a small amount of different planets. 18 quintillion. Yep, I didn't realise that was actually a number either. And the game is relatively simple. You just have to explore, survive, craft, build a few houses, and then fight your way out of some sticky situations. The game does have a story, but it isn't really the main factor to this game. It's just something that you can do if you so choose. I've known a lot of people to just ignore it, myself included. If you were to play this game now, and you're into those big open world games where you can spend thousands of hours just relaxing and exploring, you're going to love this game. You'll enjoy the ridiculously large amount of different terrains to discover, the amazing creatures you'll get to meet, and obviously everyone knows in any game that has base building in it, you get to build the best house that is conceivable, at least within the game's parameters. You can even play this game with all of your friends if you want to, even if you have a different console, because yes, this game is now cross-platform. But the issue is, the game wasn't always like this. When it first released, it was a broken mess, with a terrible reception from wider audiences because of the simple reason that the game just didn't release complete. Does this sound familiar? So Hello Games released a terrible game that, in all honesty, sounded great. But because of all the things that they said were going to be in the game at launch weren't, it created a little tiny bit of backlash. They told us that we would have a load of choice in this game, anything that we could make. But this was a lie. They told us we would have access to multiplayer from day one, to make sure that exploring the cosmos was more enjoyable with a team in tow. This was also a lie. One of the funniest things that was said was in the press portion of this game, was that the other players online could see you in the wild. Kind of like in Temtem, or any other MMO. But it was a whole, yeah, you could run into other people, but because of how big this game is, the likelihood is really small. Guess what? This was a lie. Inevitably, the problems with the game all came out because there was just too much promise for this game. Loads of different mechanics and features were showed off at E3 and on their promotional videos. And most of this content just ended up getting canned from the game, but was never really mentioned or spoken about at all. This game is already looking terrible, right? But it gets worse. Usually, when a company releases a video game, they'll send out review copies to different people to get feedback and to help get reviews out. These are usually, journalists and everything that goes along those lines, like IGN, Game Freaks, that other company that does game reviews. I don't know, I'm no expert. But they didn't send out any. No review copies for this game whatsoever, and to be honest, it ended up being their biggest downfall. Turns out the reason why they wouldn't do this is just because they really didn't want people to be playing the game before the day one patch. They wanted the game to be ready to play when it got reviewed. Spoiler alert though, even after the day one patch, the game was empty and barren and still so lackluster that people just didn't enjoy it. But hey, this was all back in 2016, right? Currently in 2023, this game has been a massive success. The game had one of the worst launches in video game history, but has managed to have one of the best redemption arcs in all of gaming altogether. You know the Avengers, right? In the MCU? Remember how towards the end everyone started to really love Loki? Well, No Man's Sky is the Loki of gaming. It's terrible to start with, but has almost become a household name due to the nature of its all well-deserved glow-up. Hello Games have done incredible things. They've done a great job at making sure that people didn't lose faith in their studio. They added all the things that they said the game was going to have at launch. It just took them a couple of years to do so. This allowed for the game to go over to the Nintendo Switch due to great reception, and it is currently sitting at a 7 out of 10 over on the Steam store, and people know on Steam that they're not very nice in that community sometimes. But you see, there's a reason that I bring this up. I'm not here to specifically talk about No Man's Sky. Most people will probably agree that No Man's Sky was a first-time event. Something that shouldn't have happened, but it did. A game that was overpromised and then released as absolute trash? Does it remind you of anything in more recent years? Cyberpunk 2077? Battlefield 2042? Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2? You know, the second one, not the second one. You know what I mean. Well, No Man's Sky is a game that set a precedent for something that has now somehow became an acceptable level to release a game. The last few years, we've had games being delayed, and then sometimes they just drop off the side of the earth. But luckily, No Man's Sky made the planet spherical, so at least, they can't fall off the side of the earth there anyway. I understand that the delays are beyond frustrating, but it's showing that some companies are taking a bit more consideration for looking after their games. However, there's others that just don't seem to be getting this right. Let's look at this from a wider point of view. We had Cyberpunk get delayed for years, and then when the release finally came up, they were like, oh, by the way, we recommend you have the absolute best hardware to run this game at minimum settings. Like, they actually recommend people using a 3080 during the worldwide chip shortage where graphics cards were just impossible to get a hold of. The game released so broken on the PlayStation that Sony had to pull the game from the store and apologise to people for them spending their money on it and wasting their time dealing with the refunds. But how is Cyberpunk looking right now though? It's been a year? I'm currently halfway through the game, so I'll be making a video about it once I'm done, but to be honest, it's seeming a lot less broken now than it was at launch. But make sure you're subscribed to see that video in the next couple of weeks. Then we had Battlefield 2042. It was literally unplayable. The beta was so bad that I managed around half a game until I thought, I'm out. I quite literally could not see my gun for the majority of the time I was playing the game. Not because I'm blind or inept, simply because the gun just didn't load in for me, nor did the tank that kept blowing me up. But how is it right now? It's actually decent. It's a Battlefield game at the end of the day. It's been out for a year, I'm not experiencing any of the issues I originally did, and now the game is quite enjoyable. At least to some degree when, you're bad at competitive games. I mean, it's still not perfect, but with a few glitches here and there, it's an awful lot better than the unplayable mess than when it first launched. And then there's Call of Duty, one of the most popular franchises in the world, alongside the likes of Pokemon and Mario. The new game that came out last year was a buggy mess, the game released in October being an absolute state. The game was almost unplayable on PC, at least for me and my friends. Apparently if you didn't use the GTX cards or you were playing it on console, it was bearable. But I managed a solid 15 FPS and had the game crash in between every other game on multiplayer. They said that the actual release was going to be 2 weeks after that, when they had released the new Warzone, but then why release the game 2 weeks early? I mean, you have deadlines to hit, and I do get that, but don't release a game that you know is fundamentally broken at full price just so people have to actually wait for it to get fixed when the main release comes out. If I'm being honest, I've fallen out of love with COD in recent years, as they've taken more of an approach towards Warzone and the Battle Pass instead of the traditional multiplayer that I used to enjoy as a kid. And I do get it. Warzone is incredibly popular, and I'm sure that this model is just making them a ton of money. But it really isn't for me. I feel like there's probably a video within Call of Duty all in itself, but I'm gonna have to save that for another day. Modern Warfare 2 only actually became playable for me around 4 weeks before I posted this video, so that's what? 2, maybe 3 months of not being able to play a game that I had to pay full AAA price for. I think that's quite ridiculous, really. And then one of my favourite franchises, Fallout, has also suffered from this ridiculous craze. Look at Fallout 76. We all know that every single Bethesda game comes out looking a bit dated and being buggy as all hell. But that was a game that released in such a state that even to this day it hasn't managed to fully recover. As a long-time fan of Fallout, I still struggle to get involved with that game. They made so many mistakes on the launch, and some of them they just don't know how to save. So they're just accepting them as being, it is what it is, and they're letting the game carry on. No Man's Sky managed to start a fad where people, developers, believe that they can release a game broken, then just fix it up as time goes on. And I have to say that I don't think it's just me that believes this is ridiculous. This isn't a great business model to go for. If I sell you a Subway and just give you 50% of the ingredients, and then 3 minutes, I will just come over, open it up, and slip in another piece of meat or tomato into your sandwich whilst you're eating it, would this be acceptable to you? The No Man's Sky effect has to stop. This needed to be a one-time thing, a redemption arc to tell your friends and family about, not a new business model to hype, disappoint, and then make it up to your audience. 2023 needs to be where this ends, and it's clear that there's some big AAA projects right now that could end up being disastrous. Now I know that not all of this could be just pushed down to a poor work ethic. We had a global pandemic, a war, and that's without going into all of the political stuff that's going on right now with a bunch of different studios being brought out and whatever could potentially happen during mergers there. But we're almost out of the aftermath of the pandemic. This means things should go back to how they were, and with all of that being said and done, we should not be accepting games to continue to come out as a broken shell of what we are promised. If you tell me that I can play with my friends, I want to be able to play with my friends. I want to be able to see the stuff you're showing me in the trailers in the actual game without having to wait 6 months for patches and fixes. I know I can't be alone in how I feel about this, so feel free to let me know down below how you feel about the No Man's Sky effect and how this has affected you. If there's any games that I missed that are also broken, please just let me know. Subscribe if you're new, like the video if you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take it easy.